This is Rob Tebbutt for Boxing Social, delighted to be joined by renowned trainer Abel Sanchez. We're here in sunny old Glasgow, ahead of your fighter Ryan Martin's bout with Josh Taylor in the World Boxing Super Series. First of all, Abel, how are you?
I'm doing well. Finally the sun comes out. It was raining the last couple of days, but I'm glad the sun's out now.
I think it's because I arrived in Glasgow yesterday.
Is that what it is? You brought the sunshine with you? Very good. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. First of all, before we come on to this weekend's card, obviously your man Ryan Martin challenging Josh Taylor at the SSE Hydro Arena. Just like to have a little bit of a chat with you. First time I've sat down and interviewed you. Tell fans, I mean, everybody's familiar with your work, certainly your more recent work, but you've worked with some notable fighters over the series of your career. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your backstory, how you came into boxing and how you became to be the renowned trainer that you are?
Well, I started my own group, by myself in '86 with a young man named Lupi Aquino, who eventually I crowned champion, and then the next three after that became champions: Terry Norris, Orland Norris, Paul Vaden. I've had 18 so far. We've had some great success. We have a good system. I've been blessed.
What was it? Why boxing? Why did you come into boxing? What was was it something you'd always been passionate about in your life? Is it something that you'd thought of from a young age? What was your entrance into boxing?
No, originally I'm actually a general building contractor. I build homes. I build buildings. I'm a builder, and in my late teens, in my early construction career, I decided to take karate lessons, taekwondo, and it evolved into kickboxing, and then it evolved into just boxing. And I think that God put us on this earth to do some things, and I think I was put on this earth to be a teacher. I've trained a lot. I've taught a lot of guys to be contractors and carpenters, and I've had success in teaching guys how to fight.
So you're a builder in more ways than one. Did you have like an early? I mean, you mentioned teachers. You feel like you're a teacher. It's kind of like a well-spoken rhetoric in boxing these days that boxing doesn't have teachers anymore. It has coaches. Or do you agree with that? Is that something you'd concur with, or do you feel like there are sort of teachers? Obviously, you've mentioned yourself. Do you think the role of a trainer has changed at all?
Well, I think it has changed. I think that the unfortunate thing is the internet has produced a lot of guys that don't get to the point where they're actually teachers. They know the sport, but they haven't got the experience and the knowledge and the studies to really be teachers. Everybody today wants things done in a hurry. We live in a microwave world. Everybody wants things done like now. And you don't get a chance to develop. You don't get a chance to develop the fighters. You don't get a chance to develop as a coach. A lot of the fighters now get in title fights before they get their 20th fight. And it's unfortunate because they don't become the fighters that they could, like the fighters of the past.
Did you have any training influences when you started? Was there other coaches or trainers around that you sort of picked a little bit from to help you become a better trainer? Or was it something that you just worked on yourself?
Oh, no, absolutely. I think that for me it was Emmanuel Stewart. When I first saw him work a corner early in his career, I said, that's the guy I want to be. That's the kind of corner man I want to be. That's the kind of coach I want to be. We spent a lot of time together before he died. Actually, while he was younger too. I fought him with my guys and his guys, I think 8 or 9 times. So it was a guy that was very easily accessible. It was a guy that was willing to partake and discuss his career and give you bits and pieces of what he thought you should do, give you advice. He wasn't shy with his instruction. It was very easy to talk. He was very easy to talk to. So I would say Emmanuel Stewart was on a trainer side. On a boxing side, I think Alex Arguello is somebody that I try to pattern my training style towards. I thought he had a great left hand, and most of my guys have very good left hands, hooks and uppercuts and body shots. So the influences were there for me. It's just a matter of me trying to develop it on my own terms.
Now, as I mentioned off camera, you're slightly bigger in real life than I actually remember or have seen on TV. So please don't hit me when I say that you've been around the block and you're now sort of an elder statesman of boxing. Do you still find that you're learning new things? Do you think that's important for a coach to continue to develop with the way that boxing is moving these days?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you have to continue to learn every day. You pay attention, and it's not necessarily learning things that you want to do. It's learning things that you've always thought were incorrect, and people are continuing to do them. You want to make sure that you stay ahead of the game and not so much in the new technologies, but making sure your fighters are ready to fight the guys that they have to fight. A lot of the old methods are sometimes better than the new methods because the new methods are something that, like I said a little while ago, it's a microwave thing. Is you want them results now. Results come in time. Results come with training. Results come with apprenticeship. Results come with internships. Results come with experience, and or good results anyway. I've tried to pattern myself like the old coaches to make sure that I'm not in a hurry, that I want to make sure that these guys develop so that we can have the product that should always be there, should be there at the end, not the product in the middle.
Now, you mentioned him at the start of the interview, somebody you work with, Terry Norris, one of the most exciting fighters, one of the most sort of pleasing to watch fighters of indeed any era. Just tell me a little bit about what it was like to work with him and your kind of journey with Terry Norris, who had such a storied career.
Terry Norris was an exceptional athlete. You could drop him onto a football field and he'd excel. A baseball field, he had a 4-year ride to Baylor before he decided on a baseball scholarship before he decided to box. So he was an exceptional athlete. So it was easier to work with somebody like that as soon as you ask him to do something, he does it with ease. He was one of these guys that just so high-strung that he just wanted to fight. He just wanted to hurt somebody. And so it's easy to work with somebody like that because you don't really have to push that many buttons. He's in the Hall of Fame now. He had a storied career. He taught me a lot, just like I taught him a lot. The reason we're here today is because of the experiences that we have as a young coach with fighters like that.
Now, you mentioned he had that kind of natural athletic gift and that sort of eagerness to fight. In its own way, does that kind of present its own issues for you as a trainer? Not issues, but things that you have to work with and taper and potentially steer him in a different direction with regards to training as other fighters?
No, what it does is it makes you a better coach. It makes you a better coach because you're not dealing with a normal kind of guy. You're dealing with an exceptional athlete that you're going to have to design and you're going to have to perfect some things on a higher basis than the normal guy. So it makes you that much of a better coach. It advances you as it advances him. It helps you with the rest of you guys. This young man that I have here today, fighting Josh Taylor, Ryan Martin, reminds me a lot of Terry Norris. The only difference I think that I see in both guys is that Terry was a mean guy and wanted to hurt you. Ryan is a real nice man with all the athletic abilities, with all the speed and the movement like Terry, but he just. We'll see on Saturday night if he can bring that meanness out, but it challenges you as a coach to work with somebody like that.
Now, we were going to come on to Ryan Martin later, but I think you made a very interesting point there, and it's something that was brought up in the press conference yesterday about this mean streak that Ryan potentially doesn't have. He's a very nice man, very big beaming smile, very nice to be around. In your role as a coach, I mean, you've worked with some tremendous power punchers, some guys who I certainly wouldn't like to be in the ring with. How difficult is it to kind of bring that out of somebody? Is it something that can be taught? Is it something that you have to instill in him every day in the gym? And is it something that if he doesn't have it, will hold him back in his career?
No, it won't hold him back because his abilities are exceptional. But having the other fighters in the gym and putting him in situations where he has to bring that out, putting him in situations continuously every day where he has to bring out that meanness a little bit, that will eventually manifest itself in a fight. And if it does, then little by little he will be able to combine that meanness with the abilities that he does have.
And Ryan Martin is somebody who's not massively well known on these shores. And as a boxing fan, I followed his career when he was a lightweight. He seems to have not yet, at least, fulfilled the potential that he showed as a lightweight when he was bursting onto the scene. With that being said, when he came to your gym, how different is he now compared to the fighter that you had, and how far do you think he still has to go to fulfill that potential?
He's tremendously different than he was when he first came. I've been with him now for on my own for about 4 fights. He was in my gym several fights before that. He has, because of his abilities, athletic abilities, has been able to develop a little quicker than most guys. He is by far one of the I would say athletes like Terry Norris, best athletes, just all-around athletes in my gym. There's some guys that are just boxers, some guys that are just designed for boxing, but I think Ryan was designed for a lot of different sports. It's just a matter of taking advantage of the situation that we have coming up, and then propelling him on, because he is a unknown. This is only his second or third fight at 140 pounds. He had a very good amateur career. He's undefeated, but these kind of fights and these kind of tournaments, these kind of situations put you in a position to reach that those heights that you think you can reach. And as a coach, I think he has the abilities now. It's just a matter of putting it together on Saturday.
You mentioned this is only his third fight at 140 pounds. How much better is he, or how much easier is it for him to certainly make weight, but also perform in the ring now he's not? Because he's a big guy. I mean, he's even at 140 pounds, he doesn't look like a lightweight who's moved up. How easy is it for him now, or how much more easy is it for him to compete at this higher weight class?
He's a young man, so 140 right now is the good weight for him. He may eventually move to 147, but he was killing himself to make 135. And it was affecting his performances. At 140, he feels comfortable. He will obviously grow out of that eventually, but at 140 right now, that's his perfect weight. He will get much better because he'll be able to do the things that physically that he can, because he's not hurting himself.
What do you make of Josh Taylor? He is somebody who is tremendously well known, particularly in sunny old Glasgow. He's somebody who, over on these shores, has done an awful lot in a very short space of time. Just your thoughts on him as a fighter. How much have you seen of him, and what do you think that he does well or doesn't do well when he faces Ryan Martin?
He's an exceptional fighter. He's done very well here in Glasgow and here in Scotland. His inexperience may be his downfall. He's only 13 fights. He's had some very good fights against some very well-picked opponents. He looked very good against Postal, but he's not fighting Postal on Saturday night. He's fighting Ryan Martin. But these are the kind of stars that we need to have in towns where they can build on boxing. A loss on Saturday night is not going to hurt him. It's going to teach him. He will develop from that. I think that it's good for boxing to have this hometown heroes like they do in the U.S. with Terrence Crawford and when you had Virgil Hill in North Dakota. It's just important for boxing to have roots, and I think by doing this, it's creating roots.
You mentioned Josh Taylor's only had 13 fights. He has stepped up the opposition quite well in those 13 fights. Do you think it's more beneficial? I mean, I'm kind of answering my own question in the sense of it can be different. It's different for different fighters, but is it more beneficial after 13 fights to have competed with the kind of opposition he has, or do you prefer more of a slow build?
I'm a slow building kind of guy. I like my guys to develop in a manner where they can. It's like having cooking something and you let it simmer for a long time is going to get better. But this opportunity for in this tournament, this is a great format, a great concept to pit the best against the best, and at this moment, it'd be difficult for anybody that's at that level to say no to this concept. A loss in this tournament is not going to hurt you. A loss in this tournament just means that the 8 guys, best guys in the world, are fighting each other, and we can build on that. It's difficult to turn down, but I think it's a learning experience for all the guys. But the fact that he's fighting here, he's got an additional hand in the ring, I guess you could say, because of the crowd. The crowd's going to help him tremendously, and I think that we just need to quiet the crowd down and make it an even fight. It'd be Josh against Ryan instead of Josh and the crowd against Ryan. But this concept is so good, it's difficult to turn down no matter what your experience is.
Now, you mentioned the concept. You've already obviously had fighters in the World Boxing Super Series. You had Murat Gassiev get to the final against Alexander Usyk. It's something that I've spoken to Shane McGuigan about because he's had George Groves in the super middleweights. Do you feel better prepared for the World Boxing Super Series? Because they do things very differently with regards to dates and fights. You know you're in the tournament, you sign up to the tournament, you kind of fight as and when the tournament tells you to. Do you think now that you've had the experience with Gassiev, this has prepared you better to take Ryan Martin into this series?
I don't think it was so much the tournament with Gassiev. I think that boxing has become so much of a business that guys are not fighting because the money's not right. Guys are not fighting because they got an O and they don't want to lose their O. Guys are not fighting because this promoter doesn't get along with this promoter. I think the fact that you get scheduled to fight, you go on to the next one. You don't have a choice on where you're going to fight. I think that it needs to go back to that. I think that it needs to go back to that so that the fans are able to enjoy the best fights all the time, not just you tune on the TV and you're watching 3 fights on TV and only one of them is something that you want to watch. The rest of them are blowouts. I think that hurts our sport. So the fact that they're putting these guys to fight the best against the best where the tournament deems it correct to be doing it is a good concept. The fighters don't have a choice. The managers don't have a choice. You better be ready when that tournament calls. You better be ready when the fight is scheduled. You better be ready to fight wherever, because if you're a world champion, you're exactly that, a world champion, not a Scotland champion. You don't just fight in Scotland. If they tell you to fight in the U.S., you fight in the U.S. I think that it grows you globally, and it grows the sport even more than it already is growing.
In your role as a trainer, does it make your life easier? Do you prefer having that kind of regimented process of knowing that if your fighter wins, he will fight again against this guy, he will fight against this guy if he wins? Does that make your job easier? I mean, keeping hold of fighters in camp, not having to chase them down and work off weight and stuff because they already know? Is that easier for you?
It makes it a lot easier. It makes it a lot easier because you know that you're fighting. A lot of times, guys don't fight but once a year, and that's very difficult for a career. This career of a fighter is so short that if you don't take advantage of it, it's difficult to get momentum going. By fighting every 4 months, let's just say, because of this tournament, it just creates that want for the fighter and that want for the coach and that want for the gym. The gym now becomes a vibrant place because you have sparring, you have guys continuously in the gym, and you become better. You become better because you don't let yourself forget the things that you were practicing while you were in the gym at one time,
So Ryan Martin facing Josh Taylor, as we've already alluded to earlier on in the interview, Ryan Martin, not somebody that a lot of people know a tremendous amount about. What is it in Ryan Martin that you believe will be the difference when he fights Josh Taylor?
I think that the hand speed and in the combination punching, the high quality combination punching, I think will be the difference in beating Josh. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy because we have to, first of all, I think we have to quiet the crowd. We have to start off and quiet the crowd, and if the crowd's out of the fight, then it's going to be the judge is not going to be influenced. But I see a very difficult fight. Josh is an exceptional fighter. He's going to be an exceptional fighter, even more exceptional fighter when he gets a little older, or more experienced, I should say. But I think I have the guy in this fight to be able to thwart and to be able to win, to be able to advance to the next level. And I think Josh will find that out on Saturday. But the best part about it is going to be the kind of fight that's going to be very competitive and very well fought because they're both very skilled fighters.
Now, you alluded to it earlier on in the interview, Josh Taylor's last fight against Victor Postol. Very close fight, albeit for some poor judging. That had the fight a lot wider than it actually was. What did you make of the fight? What did Josh show you in that fight that, obviously, I'm assuming you're going to be combating on Saturday night, but what did he do well against Victor Postol? Were you impressed by his performance?
Of course I was impressed. He's a skilled fighter. He fought an ex-world champion, but an ex-world champion that doesn't compare to Ryan Martin. I believe Victor is on the tail end of his career. I think Victor is the kind of guy that takes no chances, the kind of guy that is going to be a good opponent to make the other guy look good. But a win against a world champion, a win like that on your ledger is always a very, very positive thing. So we just have to make sure that we don't allow Josh to get into the fight like he did with Victor.
What have you made of the rest of the tournament in the 140-pound category? We saw Baranchik come past Yigit this past weekend, Kirill Relic as well. Have you caught up with the rest of the tournament? Is it something that you've looked at, or is it something? Are you focused squarely on Ryan Martin?
I look at all of them, but I'm focused on Ryan Martin. But I know who won. I know how they won. When it comes time that we face one of them, then I'll do more research on them. But I know who is next and who is not. But right now the important fight is Josh Taylor on Saturday night, making sure that we get past that one so then we'll worry about the next one. I think the next one will be Baranchik for us. So at one time, maybe about 8 months ago, I was offered Baranchik to train. The guys in Oklahoma that have him offered to send him to my gym. I just didn't have the facility available for him to come and train, and I turned him down. But we're going to be facing him now, so it's hopefully we'll be facing him now, and we'll see if he's developed like I thought he could develop.
Now, you say that you were offered the chance to train him and it was a facilities-wise. Had you had the facilities or the capabilities to train him at the time, would he have been somebody that you'd have been interested in? Was he somebody that you rated who came to your gym?
Well, what I do is I allow these guys to come to my gym for 4 weeks, paid to be there 4 weeks, and then I evaluate them. I see how they work. I see what their work ethic is. I see if we're going to get along. I don't ever want to go into something with commitments. I want to go into something because we both agree on a particular method. I don't want to be married to somebody if I'm not going to get along with them. So I would have taken him for 4 weeks and seen he had the right people behind him that I wouldn't mind working with him. A lot of times you don't work with a fighter because of the baggage that they bring along, the situation that they have outside the ring. But this kid had a good situation, so I just didn't have it available at the time. But at the time I have another kid named Salcedo who's fighting Hooker for the 40-pound title. So I have some good fighters at that weight. I really didn't need another one. I didn't have the availability to be able to work with them.
You mentioned you've got Alex Salcedo fighting Hooker, you've also got Ryan Martin. When you've got two fighters already, or two or more fighters, or even one in the same weight class, does that play a part in your mind when you kind of think, well, these guys potentially could be rivals, obviously you don't want to train fighters to fight against each other. Does that ever impact on your thinking?
Never. We have one day at a time. We train for this fight, we train for the next fight, and if eventually, a couple years down the road, they're so good and they're at the top level where they have to fight each other, well, then we've done our job. We've done our job not only developing them, but taking them to the point where they're going to make some money. Well, that's what this is all about, glory and money and making sure that we do our job. And if they get there, fantastic. Then we'll worry about it then.
Now, what you were saying about Ivan Baranchyk, forgive me for reading between the lines, it reminded me of what I've read. I've obviously not spoken to you about it, of your time with Sergei Kovalev. Now, not comparing the situations, as you say, you've nothing but good things to say about Baranchyk. Tell me about your time with Sergei Kovalev, because I've seen certain things or I've read certain things where the relationship, the relationship is no longer. So what was that? What happened with you and Sergei Kovalev, and why are you not training him, and why did you not continue to train him?
My camp, my gym, I should say, is a place where I want to go to work. I want to go there. I want to be there as many hours as I can. I truly enjoy going to my gym. Sergey had ideas that I didn't particularly agree with, training-wise. So it was better to separate. I have enough work as it is. I had enough work then. Sergey was a great fighter. I told him he was going to be world champion. I had him for, I think, 8 fights with 8 knockouts. But I'd rather be able to go to my gym without having to worry, I got to go face that guy. I got to go work with that guy. I don't want to work with that guy. But he's a hard worker. He had some different ideas, and it was some ideas that just didn't coincide with mine, and it was better to part ways. And he's had success, and I've had success, so it's worked out for both of us.
Now, he's somebody who obviously went on to work with John David Jackson, become world champion. Quite acrimonious fallout with John David Jackson after guiding him to a world title. What do you make of that? He then went and changed trainers. I can't remember the guy's name. The guy who used to train him when he was an amateur. They're no longer together. And now he's with Buddy McGirt. When a fighter kind of... Well, first of all, does that surprise you that he has changed so many trainers and gone with such different trainers? And secondly, how do you think him and Buddy McGirt will get on?
I think that he's the kind of fighter that has to be in charge. And when you have a 3-time world champion as in John David Jackson, obviously a great fighter who knows boxing, you have to allow him to teach you. You have to allow him to develop you. You have to allow him to impart some of the knowledge and some of the experience that he's had in order to get better. We all learn by taking on different things, by looking around and making sure that we learn from the things outside of our own realm. Sergey had this idea of how he wanted to train and how he wanted to do it, and it's worked out real well for him. He's world champion, but I think that he would develop a lot more if he had allowed John David to at least listen to the man. From what I read and what you just said, their relationship didn't work out so well. And then Sergey went on to hire a couple amateur coaches. That didn't work out too well. So maybe some of the things that he was doing were not the right things for his career, but we don't get in the ring, he does. He's going to do what he feels is best for him. Now, Buddy, hopefully he allows Buddy, again, another great fighter and a good coach. He allows Buddy to at least impart some of the knowledge that he has, and there's no reason why Sergey can't rise to that level again.
Has he fulfilled his potential from that fighter that came to the gym? Obviously, it's sort of a silly question to ask. He's unified world champion, somebody who's fought in a lot of big fights. But do you still think that he could have been a bigger, better fighter than potentially it's turned out for him?
Absolutely. In the short time that I had him for about a year and a half, you could see that this guy had so much potential. But I think that he capped it, he thwarted it, he didn't develop the way that he could have developed. But doesn't mean that you can't do it now. He's not that old, and he's got a good guy behind him now with Buddy. If he allows Buddy and if they put their heads together, I think that he can get back to the top again.
Tell me about Big Bear. It's kind of this mythical place for a boxing fan. We hear all of the stories. I mean, it looks fantastic. You got all this beautiful imagery. Tell me about the first time you went to Big Bear.
The first time I went to Big Bear was in 1991. The Goosens, Larry Goosen and Joe Goosen had a training camp up there. Then I started going in 92, 93 when they moved it to another place. And then in 96, I went up to train Miguel Angel Gonzalez for the fight against Oscar De La Hoya. I fell in love with it. I'm a building contractor, so I started looking around to see the possibilities of developing homes there. And I ended up buying a bunch of property, vacant property, and developing homes and selling them. I've built probably 40 homes up there so far. It's a place where it's grown, obviously, because of the notoriety and because things develop. But it's a place where the solitude, the altitude, the fact that it's a small town, the fact that it's not going to get any bigger because the highways are going to be difficult to make wider, all those things combined, I think, make it for a perfect place to train. The sidewalks roll up at 7 o'clock. There's no activity after 7, 8 o'clock for young men, anyway, for young kids. So for us, we have like a captive audience, I guess you could say, because we're stuck with, or the fighters are stuck with, you train, you run, you eat, you train, you run, you eat, and prepare for a fight. You have nothing else to do.
Tell me about your day-to-day. You've just alluded to it in a very broad sense of you train, you fight, you eat. But what's your day-to-day? What time do you get up? When do you go to the gym? What's kind of the process for you day-to-day at Big Bear?
Well, 5 days a week. Actually 6 days a week we run. 5 days a week we run distances and sprints. And on Saturday we run 5 miles. But we meet in the gym at 6 o'clock in the morning. We stretch a little bit, warm up a little bit for about 15 minutes. At 6:15 we take off on a run as a team. Whatever guys I train as a team. They work out as a team even though they fight by themselves. I think that it's important because they live together and they train together to make sure that they come down, they shake hands every morning, they say hello to everybody in the morning, that we keep it on a family basis. They're all rooting for each other. So at 6:15 we take off on a run. At that time I decide what we're going to run and how many miles we're going to run. I follow them in my vehicle to make sure that I follow them for different reasons, but most of the important reason is to see who is not healthy, who is limping, who is not running correctly, who is not running at the speed that they normally run. So that way I can either ask what the problem is or tailor my training in the afternoon towards that. If somebody is hurting, then obviously I'm not going to work them as hard. On Tuesdays and Thursdays we run sprints, and basically the same thing. We meet at 6, we run at 6:15. But I think that it's important. It always has been important for me anyway to have a regimented schedule. Everybody trains at a certain time. I have opening or slots from 11 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and 5 o'clock, so that everybody has their time to get individual attention.
Now, I speak to Shane McGuigan about this, and he says that he's inundated with people who want to come and train with him. I'd be astonished if you're not the same, and I'm sure you do get a lot of offers from fighters. How many people are currently in your stable or train out of your gym? And is it a case of, do you ever get to a point where you're like, right, that's enough, I can't take any more, no matter who, or is it a case of your doors are always open for the right type of fighter?
The doors are always open for the right type of fighter, yes, but it's got to be a fighter that fits my mold, that fits the kind of fighter that I want to train, and also that's in the weight division of fighters that I already have. That way they can all work together. If I have a bunch of heavyweights, I'm not going to take a flyweight. It doesn't make no sense to me. But right now I think what I need to have is 10 fighters. Exceptional fighters in my gym. We've developed a good farm system. I just took on 2 heavyweights, Joe Joyce here from the UK and Guido Vianelli. So it all depends on who they are, and it all depends on what they bring with them, and it all depends on what I think I can do with them. It doesn't do me no good to take on a guy that has no, I'm not going to say no future, but has no possibilities of getting to the point where I want to get him.
Now you mentioned Joe Joyce. He's somebody who I've been into contact with, being around from the same sort of area. Tell me about Joe Joyce coming to train with you. He's somebody who's come from Ismail Salas, quite different from what I can see training method. Tell me about how that process came along and why Joe Joyce? Why was Joe Joyce somebody who said, okay, yes, I'll take him and I can train him?
Well, the reason I took Joe on, first of all, Sam Jones, his manager, called me up and asked me if I was interested. I researched him, and the reason I took him on is because I have 2 cruiserweight champions. I have Murat Gassiev at the time and was a champion, and I also have Arsen Goulamirian. Arsen has sparred with Joe, so I took Joe on because I thought that we could help each other that way. But having him in camp really has been a joy. He's really a pleasure to be around. What a nice young man, what a honest young man. So it's easy to work with somebody like that. He fit the mold. Again, he fit the mold of the kind of person that I want in my camp. He works hard. He's a big man. He's going to be a little different than the other fighters that I have because he's a heavyweight, and his style will be more of a George Foreman style. But unlimited potential. He is an exceptional athlete who just doesn't know how to say no, doesn't know how to, you ask him to do something, he just continues to try as hard as he can to please you. So it's easy to work with somebody like that, and it's easy to have somebody like that in camp because they're willing to do, they're not there arguing with you about what they don't want to do. Instead, they're just trying to do what you want them to do.
It's sort of similar when what we were talking about with Josh Taylor, in a sense of Josh Taylor has come and done a lot in a very short space of time as a professional, certainly to this point. Joe Joyce is somebody who's Olympic silver medalist. He's somebody who's certainly over here. He boxed. Oh God. Just one second, Abel. I'm just trying to think. Ian Lewison, sorry Ian if you're watching, in his second professional fight. So he's somebody who is, he's not a young spring chicken. He's in his 30s, his early 30s. He's somebody who's looking to try and get on with things in the professional career. How quickly are you looking to move him? How good is he right now? And how long would it be before he can kind of challenge the top guys in the division?
You have to understand the difference between Josh Taylor and Joe Joyce as far as careers. Joe Joyce is probably the most celebrated amateur heavyweight in England history, in UK history. And you've had some gold medalists here. You've had some very good fighters at heavyweight. Second, he was a silver medalist in the Olympics. You don't get to be a silver medalist in the Olympics by fighting nobodies. So you have a guy that's very accomplished coming out of the gate. So because he's 33 years old, there's going to be the management and I have discussed the fact that we have to move him quicker. We have to move him a lot quicker because he is 33 years old. But fortunate for him, heavyweights kind of develop at a later age anyway. But he's got time. He's got 3 or 4 good years to get to that point. And I think in 3 or 4 years we're going to get him to the heights that they're dreaming of and that I think he can get to.
So it'll be that long, 3 or 4 years. So it's sort of 36, 37, not sooner before he's kind of taking on the fringe world guys?
Oh, no, he'll be taking the fringe guys in the next year, but I'm talking about to the peak where he's, you're talking about him in the same sentence with Lennox Lewis and Vitaly Klitschko in those years. I think that by 36, 37, you'll be saying his name along the same lines as those guys.
All right, okay, so that is really upper echelon. So forgive me, I was thinking kind of modern day Wilder, Joshua, etc. Moving away, we've been doing this for nearly 40 minutes, and I'm yet to bring up Gennady Golovkin. First of all, how is Gennady?
Gennady's doing very well. He's on vacation right now. He's been on vacation for about a month. We're going to get together at the beginning of next year and plan out what we're doing and how we're doing it. He's happy. He's with his family. He's taking it easy. He had a very hectic schedule the last 3 or 4 years, so it's good for him to have some time off.
What does Gennady Golovkin do on holiday? I mean, he doesn't strike me. He's been so active throughout his entire career. I just can't imagine what he would do. I couldn't imagine him on like a lilo in a pool with a cocktail in his hand. I just couldn't imagine that. What does he do on holiday?
Gennady, first of all, Gennady doesn't drink.
Mocktail then.
Yeah. No, he was in Kazakhstan for a little while. He went to a lot of functions because that is his country. That is where he was born. Visited his relatives. He's traveled to several other countries on vacation with his family. So he's just taking it easy, just relaxing. He's not training. He doesn't train while he's away from my gym. But the fact that he's spending time with his family, I think, is important. With these people, don't understand these guys when they're in training camp. If they fight 3 times a year, they're in training camp for 2 months for each fight. So they're in training camp for a lot of time that they could be spending with their growing family. So he's enjoying that right now. And when he comes back to camp, we'll dedicate back to camp and back to boxing.
Similarly, what we've talked about in the rest of the interview, tell me about the first time you met Gennady Golovkin.
His management team called me on a Friday afternoon asking to see my gym and to meet me. That was back in 2010, April of 2010. They had visited the Wild Card, Las Vegas, the gyms in Oxnard. So he came up to my gym, he and his 2 advisors. The advisors went on into town. He and I looked at some videos of some fights that he had previously. And in my broken Russian and his no English, or my no Russian and his no English, we discussed what he could do different in these particular fights to make them easier. We talked for about 3 or 4 hours. Then we went to dinner. Just talked a little bit more. Obviously, I didn't know who he was. I had never heard his name before. I didn't really follow the amateurs. And that night we had dinner. Like I said, they went to bed. This morning, Sunday morning, we had breakfast. By that time, I had already studied him on the computer. I knew who he was. Obviously, I came with a different frame of mind on Sunday morning because I knew who he was. And we agreed that after lunch that he would come back in 2 months to start training. 2 months later, I pick him up at the airport. They call me and I pick him up at the airport. We go to the gym and we've been together ever since. That was 2010, May.
So how quickly was it that you kind of thought, this is the guy, I'm going to train this guy? Was it over dinner? Was it that night at the computer? Did you kind of look back and see the videos and think, oh my God? Or was it a longer process than that? Did he have the 4-week trial period, as it were?
No, he on the research that I'd done, his style wasn't something that I was used to. He had a very European style, very laid back foot style, and it wasn't something that really jumped out at you. His record obviously jumped out at you: 150 fights with 5 losses, amateur fights, and was, I think, 15 or 16-0 as a pro. Once I started working him in the gym and started moving him in the gym and having him do some things in the ring, I thought, man, maybe we can. Maybe this guy is, that smart one. Then about 10 days, 12 days, when he got into a little bit of big bear shape, we did some mitts. The first time that I caught his right hand, I thought, oh, this is the guy right here. This is the man right here. Because I could feel it all the way down to my toes. I figured if I can harness that, if I can get him to fight, and the first thing that came to my mind was Julio Cesar Chavez Sr. I said, this guy right here is going to be the next Julio Cesar Chavez Sr. He punches very good. He's very intelligent on where to place him and how to do it. And he's not going to be a big middleweight, so he's not going to be a tall, rangy guy. So he's a small middleweight, kind of like Julio being a smaller guy. So that's really when in my mind, I knew what I wanted to do with him. At that moment, or at that more or less at that time, I said, if you allow me 3 years of the next 3 years without any interruptions, without any questions, allow me to mold you, allow me to do the things that I think you need to do. In the next 3 years, I promise you, you're going to be the best middleweight in the world. You're going to be a world champion. Nobody's going to want to fight you. And to this date, he's never questioned anything that I've done.
Now you mentioned that kind of him hitting on the pads that first time. Was that experience unique? I mean, you're somebody who's worked with a who's who of fighters, but catching Gennady Golovkin on the mitts the first time, is that sort of a landmark point in your career, as it were? Is that something that you will always remember? Is that unique?
Absolutely, it's very unique. But it wasn't only that. I think it was how intelligent he was inside the ring. When I would ask him to do certain things, and what I would ask him, what would you do here, what would you do there, he just had an answer for it. He just, and not an answer voice-wise, an answer with his feet. So a lot of people say today he cuts off the ring better than anybody does. Well, it's because he's so intelligent inside there. I think that right there. Cam, hold on a second. What is that? Which ones? Not the ones from Ernie, the other ones? Huh? Okay, good. So just all those things put together, you as a coach, you think about not today, you think about 6 months from now, a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, and wow, I thought I can do something with this guy. It was like the moment where I felt, well, I'm no longer retired. I'm no longer in construction. I'm no longer going to do any of those things, because I think that if I devote my time to this young man, we're going to do something.
You mentioned Julio Cesar Chavez Sr. He's somebody people kind of, with Chavez, they look at the left hook to the body and the power and the chin. One thing that I think a lot of boxing, not the hardcore, quote unquote, overlook with Chavez is his defensive skills, certainly slipping punches on the inside. Do you think Gennady Golovkin gets enough credit, or has gotten enough credit throughout his career, for his defensive skills? He's somebody we mentioned Joe Joyce, Gennady Golovkin, also silver medalist at the Olympic Games. Do you think he gets the appropriate credit for his defensive skills?
I don't think you ever do until you retire. I think 20 years from now we'll give him the credit. People will give him the credit, but you have to understand, this young man had 350 amateur fights, lost 5, beat almost everybody that's anybody. People say he can't box. He didn't have 350 amateur fights and win the silver medal in the Olympics if he couldn't box. At times, fighters do things that they need to do for that particular moment. They don't have to show all their skills because it's not necessary. But the internet and the social media of today has created so many geniuses. So many people know what a fighter's supposed to be doing, but they don't know how to do it. You know, it's opinions that really don't matter. The fact that he's had 23 knockouts in a row, nobody's ever done that. The fact that he holds the knockout ratio in middleweight history, nobody's ever done that. The fact that he's made so many defenses and he tied Bernard Hopkins' record, nobody's done that but Bernard. All the things that he's done, nobody really looks at that because everybody's a genius. Everybody thinks that they know what they're talking about. I got a tweet this morning, or a thing this morning. I didn't get it personally, but it was something about who the best middleweights of all time. And you look at some of the middleweights that they're talking about, and you're talking about those records don't come close to Golovkin's records. But we're talking about those middleweights today. If you'd have talked about them back then, you don't give them the credit. Just like Larry Holmes today is one of the greatest heavyweight champions of the world. And back then, he couldn't do nothing right. You know, he couldn't do nothing right. And he's probably the greatest jab ever in the heavyweight history. But in time, he'll get the credit. Right now, we just have to continue winning. All these fighters just need to continue winning. We were talked about avoiding certain fighters, or not ducking certain fighters, not moving up in weight to fight certain fighters, not fighting our mandatories. Yet this morning, I read that Mikey Garcia vacated his title, the IBF title, to move up, and nothing is being said about that. So I think that fans go towards their particular fighter, and the ones that are loudest are going to be on Twitter and on Facebook. But who cares? As long as we keep winning and we keep doing the things that we're doing, that's the only thing that's important.
Now, we've spoken a lot about ducking throughout this interview. Gennady Golovkin, I think it's fair to say, has had his experience of that throughout his career. Since you've been working with him, first of all, how frustrating has it been for you as a trainer to not, certainly in the earlier stages of your tenure with him, to be able to get him in the ring with the fighters that you've wanted to get him in the ring with?
Look, the first fight on HBO, we fought for almost nothing. We were willing to fight just to get the fight. So we fought probably the first 10 fights on that basis, just to make sure that we were in the ring and fighting. Today, it seems like anybody that wants to fight Gennady, or first of all, let me just say when Danny Jacobs fought Gennady, he got paid so much money, was almost on a par with the champion. Today, anybody that fights a champion or a known name wants a mint. They don't want to fight; they want to retire. You know, if you really want to be a name, if you really want to be known as an exceptional fighter, you have to take the fights that are necessary for whatever it is. But it just seems that today you want retirement money to be able to take on a fight, and that's the problem with boxing today. Nobody's willing to fight, not only for legacy, for glory, but to be the best that they can be. Back in the 80s when we had Leonard, Hearns, Duran, Hagler, all those guys fought each other. They fought each other, and today we talk about those great times in boxing history. Today nobody wants to do that.
I mean, again, it seems like it was something that I mentioned earlier with regards to Kovalev. Different, obviously, with Gennady, but do you think not having those fights, not being able to get those fights earlier on in his career, has impacted how he has eventually turned out as a fighter?
Which one? What are you talking about?
So, I mean, we've got like the Sturm fight, Cotto. If he was able to get those fights earlier on in his career, do you think that would have aided his progression as a fighter, or do you think that he's still as good as he would have ever been if not getting those fights?
Well, you would have had bigger names on a record, but aided his progression. He holds the. Sure. How many more records can he hold? I mean, he's probably done more than any middleweight in history. That he's not recognized because he's not an American. Who cares? I think that his record speaks for itself. Compare it with anybody's record.
I meant more from like a trainer development point of view, getting those fights earlier in his career.
No, the guys that he fought were great fighters too, just not known in America. But if he fights, let me just say, if he would have fought DeGale here, if he'd have fought Groves here, if he'd fought, he would have been known here, but not in the States. In the States, they would have said, oh, well, those guys are from England. They're no good. You know, it doesn't really matter. You're a world champion, you're a world champion. You fight globally. You fight people that are worthy of belts. When he fought Daniel Gill was a two-time world champion. Had beaten Sturm, had beaten, this guy was a world champion. When he fought Martin Murray had beaten Martinez. Martin Murray had beaten Sturm in England. In Germany, I'm sorry. So that they're not known in the States is not the criteria for greatness. I think that all those guys that he fought, just like the guys that some of the other great champions fought. If you look at Bernard Hopkins' record that everybody talks about, the 20 defenses. Of the 20 defenses, he had two guys one guy he fought twice and one guy he fought 3 times. And one was a no decision, so how can that be a defense? That's only 19, not 20. But people don't mention that, you know. They mentioned it back at the time. They don't mention it now. 20 years from now, they won't mention those things about Golovkin. They'll mention those things about another middleweight that's trying to be somebody. You know, I think these kids deserve the credit for all the damn work that they do. And unfortunately, like I said, there's too many geniuses out there that think they know what the hell they're talking about, and they know nothing about the sport.
Talk to me about the 2 fights with Canelo Alvarez.
Well, I feel we won the first one. I feel we won the second one, but it's judging seems to be very biased in Las Vegas. They seem to take care of the moneymaker, which is fine. I understand boxing. I understand a 27-year-old means more for boxing than a 36-year-old. I understand all that. I just think it's unfair to their livelihood and their careers to allow politics to get into the reasons why you win or lose. There's an article that just came out here in the UK about the 2 fights. 90, I don't know if you've read it, but 90% of the people think that Golovkin won both fights, and this writer is talking about the injustice. But as I did in the press conference after the fight, I think at the end of the press conference, I said something about can't be a hypocrite and start complaining about all the decisions. We know that we won. The judges didn't give us the fight, but we know that we won. Everybody knows that we won. But the politics of boxing just seemed to rear its ugly head once in a while, and it did that time.
Now, I thought Gennady Golovkin clearly won the first fight. The second fight I had very close. I thought it could have gone either way. Am I wrong? Do you agree with that?
Well, I think you're completely wrong. I think that the last round, if you take the last round in consideration, Golovkin won it clearly, and two of the judges gave it to Canelo. Okay, so that in that right there tells me that 3 or 4 of the other rounds in the fight could have been the same way. But again, we can't bitch about it because I, as a coach, can't bitch about it because one of these days I'm going to be on the other end, and I can't be a hypocrite and start bitching about something that they could be gifting me with something like that. You know?
How does Gennady feel about it? He's not somebody he's been very. You've both, certainly in the wake of the second fight, have said the right things and certainly held your dignity, as it were. Is he frustrated? Does this upset him? He's now what is he 0-1-1 against Canelo when arguably should be 2-0. Is he frustrated about that? He doesn't strike me as somebody who does get frustrated, but obviously you know him a lot better than I do.
I can't speak for Gennady, but I would say as a man he has to be frustrated. He has to be frustrated because he did everything he could, pleased everybody the way he was supposed to, and it goes against you. Sometimes that frustration manifests itself in some of the things that we say. He hasn't spoken out because he doesn't feel it will help. He doesn't feel like it's something that is going to change. He just continues on with doing what he's doing. We'll see when he comes back on who we fight and where we fight. Where we fight might be how he directs his anger at it. If we never fight in Las Vegas, you'll understand why.
Where is it going to be next for Gennady? There's been a lot of rumours. Obviously, the Canelo trilogy is something that you guys want, something that I think every boxing fan wants. But there's also been the mandated bout between Gennady and Jamal Charlo. Is that a possibility? Is a move up in weight a possibility for Golovkin?
First of all, I don't think anybody's going to mandate anything against for Golovkin. Golovkin's going to do what he wants to do when he wants to do it, and a belt is not important for Golovkin. If Charlo is a fight that Gennady thinks that is the right fight for us, then we're going to fight that. But really, what does Charlo bring to the table? Charlo hasn't fought in how long, and it's one fight and he moves up to middleweight and fights for the mandatory spot. That's crazy. The politics of boxing sometimes get in the way of, just like when they removed the title from Golovkin, the IBF title. You had a fight that was delayed 5 or 6 months, 3 or 4 times, Derevchenko against Jacobs, and the fight ends up happening, and it's a dud. You know, it's a dud. Nobody watches it. Nobody wants to see it. So I think that sometimes boxing gets in its own way. Boxing sabotages its own success. Politics of organizations get in the way of the actual best fights. If Charlo is so adamant about being considered, he needs to be fighting more regular. He needs to be out there so that he can command and demand those kind of fights. Just like with the Jacobs fight when we had to fight him because of a mandatory, Charlo's going to come in and demand so much money that it's going to be impossible to happen. Just like Eubanks did, here in England. It's difficult to when fighters start thinking that they're worth something when it's not there. We're not going to play politics like that. Golovkin's not going to be ordered to fight anybody. He's going to fight who he wants to fight, when he wants to fight him. If the organization's not along with that, then who cares? We'll go in a different direction.
Is there a possibility of him moving up in weight? He's somebody who's obviously achieved seemingly everything there is to achieve at middleweight. Callum Smith has spoken about potentially fighting Gennady Golovkin. Canelo is now fighting Rocky Fielding at super middleweight. Would it be a case of him moving up potentially to try and get the Canelo trilogy or fight Callum Smith, or just as something that he's not done before yet in his career?
I've read that Callum Smith had been mentioned. Until we meet at the beginning of the year, it's really difficult to anticipate what we're going to do. I think that he needs this vacation just to get it out of his system, and then when we meet, we'll decide what's going to happen. I'm sure that Tom Loeffler, the promoter, is already working on something. I'm sure that Tom's got 3 or 4 avenues that we can go down. But Callum is a viable opponent. Callum just won the WBSS. Callum is a unified champion. Of course, he's a possibility. It's something that's, again, it's something that's worthwhile. It's not a fight that, first of all, the public doesn't want to see. Commands no money. Commands no desire to fight. So if it's a fight that makes sense, then of course I think that he will look at it. But until the beginning of the year, it's difficult to anticipate what's going to happen.
Okay, Abel. Well, I've kept you for plenty of time. Just before we go, I want to have a little bit of fun. I'm going to name some names, and you're going to tell me who wins, Gennady Golovkin or these names, and break down the fight. You don't have to go on and on, but give me a short breakdown and tell me how that fight goes. Gennady Golovkin versus Marvin Hagler.
Great fight. I think that Marvin was an exceptional champion, but I think that the abilities would be the same, but I think the size would be the difference. Marvin was only like 5'7", small man. I think that Gennady would be too big for him.
Gennady Golovkin versus Carlos Monzon.
A more difficult fight, a very awkward fighter, very rangy fighter. I've always said that the toughest fights for Gennady would be the guys like Carl Froch, who was tall and rangy. Wow. I think that's a more difficult fight than the Hagler fight. Obviously, I'm going to say Gennady would win, but it would be a difficult fight.
Gennady Golovkin versus James Toney.
Oh, that one I don't like. I was offered... believe it or not, I was offered James Toney when he had about 19 fights to fight Terry Norris, and I turned him down because I saw a video of him and I thought that fighter right there is great. That's a fight I would politic against if it was offered to us, just because James in his heyday was really a Bible. He was an exceptional fighter. He and Roy Jones probably are the two guys that in my history of being in seeing live fights, the two guys that I would have hated to face. Obviously, I'm going to say Golovkin would win, but that would be an impossible fight with James Toney.
Gennady Golovkin versus Roy Jones Jr.
That's another one because of the mobility and as a middleweight, I thought he was exceptional. That he's carried on his career, I don't like that too much, but as a middleweight, he was such a beautiful guy to watch fight. Kind of like I enjoyed watching Terry Norris just because of athleticism. Roy Jones was even more athletic, more evasive, and just it was an impossible guy to fight. Obviously, I'm going to say Gennady would win, but it would be just those two, James and Roy, would be the most difficult fights ever.
Gennady Golovkin versus Bernard Hopkins.
That's an easy fight. I think Bernard has gone on to do very good things, but I don't think Bernard had the skills or the ability to keep a guy like Gennady off. I fought Bernard with another young man, Lupi Aquino, at the end of Lupi Aquino's career, and Lupi did some things to him that I know Gennady would do to him and probably stop Bernard.
Gennady Golovkin versus Thomas Hearns.
Thomas Hearns' chin would fail him in this fight. I think that it would be a fight where both guys would probably go down because Thomas had a great right hand, but I think his chin was the issue. I think that Gennady would stop him somewhere in the last third of the fight, but it would be a barn burner. That would be a barn burner.
Gennady Golovkin versus Mike Mccallum.
Very underrated fighter, Mike Mccallum. Very underrated fighter. I think that his body work and his body of work and his body shots, people don't take into consideration how great he was. But I think because of what he achieved and because of where he got to, I don't think he got as high as the other guys. I don't know if he had been more of a showcase, if it would be talking about him like James Toney, but he was a very talented man. I still think Golovkin would beat him in a decision.
Gennady Golovkin versus Michael Nunn.
I had Michael Nunn in camp when he was with Joe Goosen. Michael Nunn was a guy that never really reached his potential. Michael Nunn was a very good rangy fighter. Michael Nunn reminds me a lot of Joe Calzaghe. Joe Calzaghe and him had the same kind of traits. Very tall, rangy guy. That would, at 168, I don't think 160 pounds would be a good fight for Michael Nunn, but I think at 168 would be a fight where I would say that he could outbox, say, Gennady, and maybe that's a draw, or maybe Michael wins.
Gennady Golovkin versus Roberto Duran.
That's an easy fight. I think that Roberto would be too small for Gennady. If they fight at 135, oh my God. Yeah. But at 160, I think Roberto will be a little too small. Roberto was good with Marvin because Marvin was the same size. They were small guys. But against Golovkin, the size would be too big.
Two more. Gennady Golovkin versus Ray Leonard.
When Ray Leonard was at his peak, that's probably the most difficult fight of all of them because he's so intelligent in the ring. I fought Ray Leonard with Terry Norris, and we beat Ray Leonard with speed. I wouldn't want to predict a winner or loser in that one. I think I have so much respect for Ray Leonard for what he did when he was a welterweight. As a middleweight, I don't know how that would go.
Gennady Golovkin versus Ray Robinson.
Ray Robinson. Maybe not at middleweight, but at welterweight, there was nobody that could touch Ray Robinson. There's nobody. Ray Robinson, I've watched so many videos of Ray Robinson and just things that he was doing back then that people are trying to do today, that it's impossible to even try to copy what he was doing back then. As a middleweight, he wasn't as effective as he was as a welterweight, but just a magnificent fighter. I mean, just magnificent in everything he did. So intelligent inside the ring, so adept at seeing things that people can't see today. And it's obvious because if you watch the tape over and over again, you can see kind of his mind thinking, right? But yeah, Ray Robinson.
Okay, well, Abel Sanchez, I've kept you for long enough. This has been an absolute pleasure to sit down with you and pick your brain on all things from Gennady Golovkin to Joe Joyce to Big Bear. Thank you very much for speaking to Boxing Social. Best of luck this weekend with Ryan Martin against Josh Taylor. Look forward to catching up with you soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me. I enjoyed it.
Thank you.